Hello, you're watching World News live from Warsaw. My name is Sasha Farbach. The newly unveiled U.S. national security strategy has sparked concern among European NATO members, signaling a major shift in Washington's approach to the alliance. TVP World spoke with Gerlinde Niehus, former NATO Deputy Director for Defense and Security Cooperation, who warned the document could be bad news for Europe and even better news for Russia.
The freshly unveiled U.S. national security strategy has raised eyebrows among European NATO member states. TVP World spoke to Gerlinde Niehus, former NATO Deputy Director for Defense and Security Cooperation, to get her immediate reaction to the document.
In a nutshell, that paper is bad news for Europe, bad news for Ukraine, very mixed news for NATO, but at the same time, it's very good news for the populist right-wingers in some of our countries, and it's even better news for Russia.
One of the points of Washington's newest course of action addresses the political situation in Europe. The document states that the US's broad policy on Europe should prioritize cultivating resistance to Europe's current trajectory within European nations.
What we are seeing here is a MAGA blueprint for Europe, and Trump wants to bond with his right-wing counterparts, wherever they are, in order to turn Europe into a mini MAGA.
One of the most grating points of the new plan is the one regarding NATO's future expansion, which reads ending the perception and preventing the reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance.
What is most harmful, clearly, is that it basically seeks to revoke NATO's open door policy for eventual membership of other countries. And this open door policy, I mean, that's enshrined in the alliance founding treaty. So it's nothing which is a little petitesse. I mean, it's really one of the cores of the alliance.
With all of these less than ideal news for Europe's relationship with the US, one question remains. Is the transatlantic alliance in a state of collapse?
On a strategic level, it is in an existential crisis because topics like Russia, Ukraine, European sovereignty, China, all these necessary strategic discussions can no longer happen in NATO with a US which is performing the way it is performing.
With drawn-out peace negotiations, Russian sabotage attempts, and now what seems like an American exodus from Europe, some of the toughest times in recent history are ahead of the old continent.
As Washington released its new national security strategy, TVP World investigated how the document compares to its previous editions, from Joe Biden's administration and Donald Trump's first time in the Oval Office. The analysis found Europe is no longer viewed as an equal and vital partner for the U.S., while Russia plays a less central role and NATO enlargement has become more controversial.
This could potentially be one of the biggest criticisms of Europe to ever be put on an official US document. So let's jump straight into it. Let's compare it to a document of same kind, but from the predecessor of Donald Trump, Joe Biden, from 2022. So when it comes to Europe, Donald Trump this year sees Europe as weak, as misguided. This is clear from numerous points in this document. He says that Europe is facing a stark prospect of civilizational erasure, and that the US should be cultivating resistance to Europe's current trajectory within European nations, very much presenting the US as the country which should be guiding Europe to some kind of direction. When we compare it to Joe Biden, this is a massive difference, as Joe Biden viewed Europe as an equal partner, an ally. He said that Europe has been and will continue to be the foundational partner for the United States when it comes to facing global challenges. Now, when it comes to Russia, Donald Trump in 2025 sees Russia as having strategic potential. He says it's in the core interest of the United States to re-establish strategic stability with Russia and that Europe should do the same. Meanwhile, Joe Biden viewed Russia as an existential threat in 2022. This is just after the start of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. And really, when you look through these documents, all you have to do to see the shift in focus is just look at how many times the word Russia appears in both documents. In the document from 2025 from Donald Trump, the National Security Strategy, the word Russia appears only 10 times. whereas in Joe Biden's document, the word appears 71 times. So a huge difference in focus when it comes to Russia and its relations with the United States. Now, when it comes to NATO, Donald Trump views it as problematic nowadays. He says that the United States should end the perception and prevent the reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance. Now, the word expanding is also curious here, as really this is also mirroring the narrative of the Kremlin, which says that NATO is expanding, whereas the alliance is actually enlarging. There is an enlargement of NATO, meaning that countries are willingly joining the alliance. There is no actual forceful expansion of NATO. When it comes to Joe Biden, he saw NATO as stronger together. He praised the fact that Finland and Sweden joined NATO in the last 2 years. But, okay, we have Democratic President Joe Biden, we have Republican President Donald Trump, so you could say that there is no surprise that there is such big difference. But let's actually compare Donald Trump to Donald Trump. Let's see how the same document written by Donald Trump in 2017 compares to the one that he has presented us with nowadays. We can see that when it comes to Europe, Donald Trump in 2017 viewed it as a vital partner, aspiring partner of the United States. When it comes to Russia, he viewed it as an adversary, not as a strategic partner. He said here, and I quote, that Russia is using subversive measures to weaken the credibility of America's commitment to Europe, standing between America and Europe. But now this divide is seeming bigger and bigger, and it's also on the part of Donald Trump. Now, when it comes to NATO, in 2017, Donald Trump saw NATO as an important alliance which adhered to the rule of crucial common defense. In 2017, in the National Security Strategy, Donald Trump mentions Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, meaning that an attack against one is an attack against all, a crucial NATO rule. There is no such mention of Article 5 in the document from 2025. So really, the difference in the documents between 2025 and 2017, written by the same people, Donald Trump, by the same person, rather, Donald Trump, is really massive.
Former Polish Foreign Minister Adam Rotfeld commented on the recent American announcement that it would not expand NATO further. Let's take a listen.
The timing of the statement announcing that the United States would not expand NATO is tied to the talks that took place in Russia between Witkoff and Kushner on one side and Putin and Ushakov on the other. This is apparently the result of an agreement between the American and Russian delegations. The issue of Moldova and other countries that are not part of the alliance is a valid question to raise. However, that question has already been answered by the Americans.
David Dunn, professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham, told TVP World that the new U.S. national security strategy marks a sharp break from 8 decades of foreign policy. He said it reflects the collapse of America's long-standing consensus around an internationalist, rules-based liberal order.
It marks a huge change to the America that we have got used to and know. It's a rejection of the world that America built. It's a rejection of America's place in that world, and it's a rejection of the idea that America is about having alliances have common interests and common values with its closest allies in Europe. Instead, what we get is criticism of Europe for being too liberal from a United States that isn't willing to criticize countries in the Middle East or anywhere else in the world for their lack of liberalism.
On Friday evening, the German Chancellor and the President of the European Commission spoke with the Belgian Prime Minister about frozen Russian assets. Prime Minister Bart de Wever is reluctant to activate and hand over the frozen Russian assets to Ukraine in the form of so-called reparations loan. Belgium is concerned that it bears too much risk of a potential Russian retaliation and the prospect of financial claims against Belgium. The EU and Germany, on the other hand, are among those who believe that using the frozen assets to support Ukraine is necessary to strengthen Kyiv's position in the ongoing peace negotiations. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen president said that after the meeting, quote, Belgium's particular situation regarding the use of the frozen Russian assets is undeniable and must be addressed in such a way that all European states bear the same risk, end quote. The European Union hopes to reach a consensus on this issue by December 18th, when European leaders are scheduled to meet in Brussels. Even if a blanket amnesty is included in a Russia-Ukraine peace deal, International Criminal Court arrest warrants for Vladimir Putin and 5 other Russian officials will remain in force. ICC deputy prosecutor said only a UN Security Council resolution could suspend the warrants issued by the court.
If there is a peace deal, which then leads the Security Council to ask us to defer an investigation, then that's a political process for the Security Council. But as far as we're concerned, we have investigated in other situations where there has been a peace deal and where the peace deal has often assisted us in the investigative process because it creates at least a margin of calm to enable us to gather evidence. But at the end of the day, it does not stop the way that justice is delivered. This is what we have found in other situations.
When it comes now to ICC processes, apart from that bracket we mentioned in respect of the Security Council route, we are obligated to observe our statute, which does not give weight to some of those political arrangements apart from that framework. So meaning that we are nobody to tell the domestic system what they can do really, but speaking for our own framework, which of course Ukraine has willingly used even before joining, I think that we will abide by our regulatory framework.
Welcome to the Chamber of Secrets. Polish lawmakers have held urgent talks behind closed doors over cryptocurrency-related security issues, TVP World has learned. Comes after Polish President Karol Nawrocki vetoed a bill to regulate the virtual currency market earlier this week.
Without their mobile phones and even without their pens, only with their voting cards, Polish MPs took part in a closed-door parliamentary session early on Friday. And while the topic was secret and some MPs didn't want to tell us anything about the details of the meeting, others did spill some beans.
Discussion was secret, and nothing which was said in the chamber can be disclosed outside.
We discussed the safety and security of Poles, including safety related to investing, financial instruments and the risks connected with them. The session mainly concerned the president's veto of the bill on cryptocurrencies.
It is believed that during the session, Prime Minister Tusk shared some details about a Russian criminal group operating in Poland and one that is financed by cryptocurrencies.
We are dealing with very dangerous phenomena. Russian money is present, the mafia is present, and these aren't figments of my imagination, but the fruit of various operations and investigations. And the money coming from those environments, which are very dangerous for Poland, was also used for political and organizational promotion.
But media reports say that the session aimed to convince opposition MPs to help reject the presidential veto. But the opposition MPs I spoke to were rather unconvinced, and they said that closing the doors on the meeting was completely unnecessary.
I may only smile about what Prime Minister Tusk is doing with the parliament. He is making the parliament his PR vehicle to launch political subjects, not important issues regarding Polish security.
We voted in favor of this bill, and we will vote to overturn the veto. But what happened today with the closed-door session was a political farce, completely unjustified by anything that was said there.
In order to dismiss President Nawrocki's veto, the ruling coalition needed 60% of votes in favor, but Prime Minister Tusk failed to garner enough support to do it. For TVP World from the Polish Parliament, I'm Piotr Miszczuk.
That's all for this latest World News Update, but stay with us right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.